When you go to listen to a news story, where do you go? Do you go to Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, or perhaps straight to social media? You may not realize that your news source is actually not exactly as trustworthy as you think due to media bias. What is media bias? Media bias is the partisanship of journalists and news anchors within public media involving the selection of events and stories and how they're covered. Today, I'm going to go further into what media bias is and how it affects society as a whole and why media bias should be outlawed. Media bias contributes to the problem of our society being torn apart by political views. If media bias were to be outlawed, it would allow the people to get the full story and allow them to think for themselves rather than the news channel, anchor, story, whatever, thinking for them. What I mean when I say that is one type of media bias that is regularly practiced by all news channels, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, everybody is guilty of it, is media bias by omission. This means that the media will actually take out pieces and parts of the story that may not represent their side as nicely as they would want it to, or they'll only leave in the parts that make their opponent seem worse than they actually are. Then they won't keep in all of the details that keeps the full truth about both sides of both parties. This may keep citizens from having fair judgment because they don't have the full story, so they will lean one way or the other completely blindly because they can't see the full thing. And they don't get to make a fair judgment based off of that. And this can cause citizens to turn against each other, and it can actually cause a lot of hostility between American citizens, and it has caused a lot of hostility between American citizens. And you may say, oh, well, I can just get my news source from two different ones and just get it both ways by adding them together. And this isn't necessarily true either, because even then, they can still omit pieces of the story. Both sides can omit one piece of information from the story because it doesn't exactly cause the reaction that they're wanting, because their main goal is to have views, and viewers means money. Actually, most Americans rely on one news source only. They either lean towards CNN or they lean to Fox News. They don't go to both because they're devoted to one political party, and they think that it would be a betrayal to go view the other side of the political party. This was extremely evident during the Trump administration and Trump's presidency, whenever he would not take any questions from CNN and he would call them fake news. So people would stop watching CNN because they felt like it was a traitor to their president to watch CNN because he would call them fake news. Even if the tables were turned and they were saying this about Fox News, it would be just as harmful, because either way it creates hostility and it keeps people from getting the full story, and it just had an extreme bias towards conservatives. Even nowadays, 71% of people get their information from social media, and this is even more harmful because social media, unlike viewing your news on TV, such as Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, these news channels are regulated, and it's harder for them to lie to people than it is for unofficial websites on social media to do, especially on Facebook. Facebook is a big one. A lot of people have been getting their news sources from sites on Facebook, and this can cause absolute false information to spread around. They can lie all they want, and they will face little to no consequence about it. And this is just as harmful because it discredits what we do have from MSNBC, Fox, CNN, etc., etc. Another type of bias is bias by selection of sources. You may see this a lot whenever a news anchor says something like, experts say, or most people believe, or observers say. And it's where they'll take little statistics and pieces of information that support their claim, and they don't actually take all of the full statistics. It kind of goes hand in hand with bias by omission, but instead it's about statistical research to support a claim. Right now, a lot of that is going around with the COVID-19 vaccine, and people are giving out different statistics, and not everybody is getting the full story on what this vaccine is and what the risks are and what it actually does, and if you have to worry or if you don't have to worry. In conclusion, I think that we need to allow citizens to think for themselves, bring people closer, and reduce the amount of hatred between opposing political parties. Media bias should be illegal because of this. There's a lot of hostility between American citizens because of media bias, and I feel like it causes a lot of drama and hatred between everybody, and it's not necessary. We should just have news channels that give you all the facts and no bias is allowed, whether it's by omissions, sources, nothing except for the pure truth, and no media bias trying to make one party look bad or the other look bad. And what can you do to help this? You can help by spreading the awareness of media bias. Actually, most people don't realize that media bias is a thing and that it affects them. So you can help by going online and spreading the awareness of media bias and trying to keep an open mind on both sides and doing your own research from time to time, because sometimes that's just what it takes to escape the media bias. Stay well informed and inform other people.